I'm going to start by welcoming everybody. I really appreciate this opportunity to have this conversation with the commissioner. My name is Greg Fox. I'm the current president of the American Academy of Pediatrics. I am the pediatrician in private practice, and interested in, for furthering the conversation on COVID-19. We, as the American Academy of Pediatrics, started a campaign a couple of months ago called Tips to Keep Your Family Healthy During COVID-19. And, we felt that it would be a perfect match to talk with the commissioner here about, what she's seeing in the schools. And, so we can discuss, what we're seeing in our offices related to schools, and, hopefully give families some advice, and also to let the families out there know that, pediatricians in Rhode Island are here working for you. And, as things come up, we would love to serve as a resource. Over the past year, all of us have been dealing with COVID-19 in different ways. To date, almost 3 million kids in the United States have had COVID-19. But the good news is that, we haven't seen, the tremendous medical illness that we've seen in, adults and other populations. The good news is that most kids that have COVID-19 medically, they have, some minor symptoms, or a lot have no symptoms at all. And in Rhode Island, we've been absolutely blessed. The Department of Health has set up a wonderful testing and tracking program. So we've been able to identify kids early, keep them out of schools. And for that reason, and all of the measures that the schools put into place back in September, schools really have not been a significant spread of COVID-19 in Rhode Island, which has been absolutely fantastic. So that's the good news. The bad news is that, COVID-19 is having some consequences on kids and families. And, that's really, what we'd like to focus on here today. And so what we're seeing in our offices and clinics really aren't, a whole lot of sick kids these days, but we're seeing a lot of families that are worried, they're just scared, and sometimes just overwhelmed. And so, what we're seeing is kids that, are struggling in school. We're seeing kids that really aren't sleeping well at night. They just miss their friends. Those are the easy ones. And those are the people that we love to see and, give some simple advice. And we'll give some of that advice here today as well. But what we're also very worried about is some more significant things, because of isolation and because kids aren't as exposed to their teachers and their school nurses, and, maybe they aren't getting their regular medical care. We're missing out on some bigger things, serious depressions and anxieties, and maybe some medical conditions that could have been picked up earlier, but just haven't been. So, that's also a reason to have this conversation, is to, let families know that, give some warning signs as to what's out there. So I'd like to start by introducing our panel. I think the commissioner kind of goes without introduction, but I'll let her introduce herself. So with me today, I have Matt Willis, who is a psychiatrist and pediatrician. He is, I'm gonna read this off my screen if I can. He is the director of the Hasbro Partial Program, which is a day treatment program for children and adolescents with combined physical and emotional challenges. He's he's an assistant clinical professor at the Department of Psychiatry and Human Behavior at the Alpert Medical School at Brown. And his biggest credentials for this talk is he has 4 daughters between the ages of 7 and 11. Allison Brindle is a pediatrician over at the Hasbro Clinic. She's the director of the Pediatric Complex Care Primary Care Clinic at Hasbro Children's Hospital Primary Care Clinic. She's an assistant professor of pediatrics at Warren Alpert Medical School at Brown University, and is the current vice president of the Rhode Island chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. And her credentials, she has 3 children between the ages of 7 and 13 as well. So my parenting credentials, I have 2 teenagers, 17 and 19. So I've been through a lot of this, and thankfully remote learning for me has been a breeze, because my kids are pretty independent. So with all that said, Commissioner, thank you again. And I encourage you to let us know what you've been hearing in the schools from your teachers and parents and other community members, and let us know how we can help out.
Yeah, so I think it starts off first. Let me tell you my credentials. I have a 10 and a 13-year-old. And they run the spectrum. So I think that what was hard for us when we first went to distance learning, we were all trying to figure it out, and we focused in a lot on the instructional piece, right? We had no idea how devastating it was going to be emotionally. And but a few months into it, we realized that our kids were struggling, not just with the distance learning and the instructional. So I have statewide students that I meet with. I have students that were in advanced placement, that were really doing well, and said to me that with distance learning, they were struggling. There was one student that for the first time in their life was failing a class, and they couldn't understand it, and they were in a remote setting, so they were in school one day and in virtual another day, and that was really hard for them. And what we're hearing from the students and the teachers is that this is it's one, it's been a long time, it's been very exhausting. It's also been a challenge for parents. There are parents that are lucky enough, like you are, Gregory, to have kids that are independent. But younger kids, kids that require different types of services and supports, that's not always easy for families. It's not always easy. And for parents that don't have the luxury of staying home, that have to go to work or may not speak the language, this is a different ball game for them to be in this position. So it creates a lot of stress and anxiety in the family, for the students, for the teachers. I think that for us, we really need the support, and we need to talk through very carefully kind of what are the things that we see that are important for our community to move forward. So I'm very grateful to the three of you for being here and for sharing your expertise with us, because you know, it's been a long road, and we sort of see the light at the end of the tunnel, sort of, right? But I think that there's going to be a lot that we need to do to kind of recover from all of this and keep moving forward in a healthy way. And when we think about education, we sometimes leave out the physical aspect as well as the mental aspect. For some kids, gym, what does the physical exercise look like, what does the mental supports look like? So all those things are important aside from the academics. So I think that we're on a journey, and we're continuously learning. We're doing this every day, and we're learning, and we want to learn from experts like you. So I want us to
Great.
dive into the questions that we have for our professionals. I'm eager for all of us to hear the tips and suggestions. And I just want to thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We need and respect your expertise. So why don't we get started?
Thrilled to be here.
Okay. So what are some of the most notable ways that COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the emotional health of children and teenagers?
Yeah, thanks so much for the question, Commissioner. And as I said, as Greg introduced me as both a psychiatrist and pediatrician, but also a father of four, I do consider that my most notable credential for this talk. And also, probably, to be honest, what I've learned the most about COVID, I've learned in the context of parenting. But as I try to apply a kind of clinical lens as well to what we've seen in terms of some of those notable ways that COVID-19 has had an impact, I'd say there's sort of four main areas that we're seeing. We're seeing absence of structure or decreased structure, both daily and weekly. And in that, I think it's hard for families, particularly for families of two parents who are working or two parents who otherwise have many other responsibilities, to really scaffold weekdays and weekends. Weekends in particular now are sort of times for families to rest, and they have sort of the absence of really any scheduled activity over the weekends, which we find really hard for kids to then restart on a Monday. We'll get to tips for that in a little bit. We also see a lot of, obviously, social isolation. FaceTime, Zoom, Teams, other virtual apps certainly make socialization possible, but not everyone has equal access to these platforms across our neighborhoods and communities. And quite frankly, virtual socialization just isn't as optimal as in-person gatherings from the perspective of developing and fostering social skills. You may have noticed virtual gatherings, even in our professional lives, have a different set of social norms than gathering in person. And we see this in our work as well, as kids are becoming increasingly hesitant to interact with groups of people in real life situations. We're also seeing two other things: less physical activity, as you mentioned. And, obviously that's having not only a physical impact, but an emotional impact as well. And also, very importantly, less contact with pediatricians and mental health providers. What happens is parents, understandably, with limited access, really are bringing their kids when really, things have really risen to a level that is no longer sustainable in their home. For internalizing and quiet kids, though, this results in underneath the surface issues sort of snowballing and not getting addressed. As a result, we're seeing kids with a lot more severe, I think, mental health presentations in our offices as well.
So how can with kids socializing less in person, what are the pros and cons of using screens and social media to meet kids' socialization needs?
Yeah, I also really appreciate the question. I think with more time spent on screens and social media, much of this time, unfortunately, is unsupervised. And I think that the lack of supervision is really where the cons lie. We can start with the pros, which certainly, this does promote socialization. It does facilitate parental sanity to some degree, to be able to have our kids be socializing on a virtual device. And certainly, we feel good about the fact that they're interacting with other children their age on that device. But again, the cons have quite a bit to do with whether or not that interaction is supervised. And there's sort of a couple of main things that stand out. I think there's an under recognition in general by us as parents that lack of supervised screen time is really quite dangerous and damaging. Many of us in this generation are really the first generation to really attempt to navigate social media for our children. If you think about past generations, this really wasn't, we don't look to our parents or grandparents to ask them what social media rules they put in place, because they didn't have this challenge or opportunity in front of them. And as a result, what we see in terms of some of the lack of supervised time, with parents falsely being reassured that this is kind of a safe venue for kids to spend time, is really more impulsive decision making, not only kind of verbal impulsivity online, but also taking risks with intimate relationships and even financial risks as well. And we see actually kids, believe it or not, garnering parents' credit cards, interacting with sources that are telling them that, X or Y product or service is available, really doing quite a bit of collateral damage there. The last thing I'd say about the cons is that, kids have a hard time remembering that social media is the human highlight reel for each child of their life, right? So what happens is a child looks at the social media post of another peer and sees these wonderful things that this peer is doing, not of course realizing that their peers are putting the greatest and the latest on their social media page, and not sort of the more mundane aspects of their life. There's a quote from Teddy Roosevelt: "The comparison is the thief of joy." And I think that's what we're seeing here. There's sort of this concept that I look at what everybody else is doing, and I see all these wonderful things they appear to be doing in their own lives, and I become quite despondent that that's not my life as well. So I'd say that probably is, in my view, best summarizes sort of the pros and cons we're seeing in our offices.
Anyone want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say, and it'll be a segue to another subject, but I would say one of the other things that we're seeing is that social media has really drawn kids in, into the late hours of the night. So I think that that's a time when their parents aren't watching as much, and we're seeing kids that are up, midnight, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, interacting, completely, uninhibited with their friends, and it kind of costs them the next day. And so that's been a real challenge for a lot of families, even of smaller kids, where the kids are sneaking phones and tablets into their beds and missing out on sleep. So it's making challenges, and particularly in the education realm, the next day when they're overtired, behavioral, concerns because they're, a little bit cranky for the entire next day. And, that's been, one of the major challenges, and that's driven a lot by video games and social media online, connections.
So you both described my house. I've had every one of those things happen in my house. So now we bring all the technology into the bedroom, my husband and I, no technology because we caught them on midnight one time. And,
Mhm.
we had quite an extensive bill from TikTok because it just says, oh, buy a credit. And when I asked, I said, who's been buying credit? She's like, it's not real money. Well, yeah, it is. So we've experienced all those in my home. So next question for all of you. How can virtual technology be used by parents to make sure children's emotional and social needs are being met while avoiding the pitfalls of excessive screen time?
Yeah, I think there's sort of a couple of different things to think about. I think with the virtual technology, I think that um, we want to try to figure out a way to utilize it in a way that's going to be most conducive to our kids. And so I think that obviously having some limits and structure in terms of screen time use makes a lot of sense. What we often hear is that one child will say that Johnny or Susie doesn't have the same strict social media or screen time rules as you do, mom, in your household, and that really doesn't feel fair to me. I want to encourage people not to worry if they happen to hear that from their child. As we are all, like we said earlier, really paving the way for what these rules are. And I myself as a parent, when I hear that, when I hear that my child says, well, that's not what Johnny or Susie has next door, I sort of have a little checkbox that goes off in my head that says I must be on the right track, right? If I've created that angst in my child and I've scaffolded it with rules. So I do think rules about screen time is certainly one place to start. And I think Dr. Fox has some thoughts about that as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that, really when you're looking at, setting those rules, and I think the commissioner, lays them out pretty well. Part of it is making sure that, when kids are using a device, particularly the younger kids, is that they have, a distinct time frame to use it and a distinct purpose to use it. And so, it's not here, here's the next 2 hours, do what you need to do. It's, you're going to, communicate with these friends. You're going to, play these types of games. And when the time is up, the time is up. And then certainly setting strict limits at the end of the night. This is the time, 8 o'clock, everything comes onto the charging station in mom and dad's bedroom. And that, can limit that. So I think, just having those conversations and setting those expectations, goes a long way, because, kids are always going to be pushing the margins when they can. But, if you can, have those conversations ahead of time, set those expectations, like Matt said, say, I don't care what Susie or Johnny's mom rules are. These are the rules in our house. Those principles apply from when my parents were raising me as well. So we just need to apply them to the modern world.
So one of the things that I'm laughing because I feel like you guys are in my house, right? Because I feel like my mother too. I'm like, well, I don't care what so-and-so's mother's doing. But one of the things that we did in our house is that we put a timer on the device. So it just automatically shuts off and has to ask us for permission to get more time. And if they do want more time, they have to earn it. They earn 15-minute increments during the week by doing other things.
Yeah.
Because if not, they'd be on it. And at the beginning of this, I felt guilty. So I sort of let them be on as long as they wanted to be honest with you. But, so there are many things. I appreciate you saying that to the parents because this is a difficult situation to navigate.
I think, Commissioner, your point's well taken, that we often think of these kids too accidentally as having kind of an inalienable right to screen time and to devices that sort of parallels their right to freedom and to shelter and food and everything else. And in reality, electronics are ultimately a privilege, right? And ultimately to be used effectively. I think the only other comment I might make is the concept of being within earshot, right? Open door policies in terms of electronics use. If your child is insisting on the need to use an electronics device behind closed doors, the radar should go up on that.
And we also have those rules in place in terms of what parental controls need to be on different kinds of devices, monitoring who, as you mentioned, Commissioner, purchases that are made on devices. And one of our mantras in our family is that it is something to do. It is not the only thing that there is to do. And as well as every family has different rules, which they all do. And I think we're starting to, you alluded to starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I think we're starting to see that in terms of other opportunities and activities that kids had previously been engaged in, starting to open their doors a little bit and starting to have some other opportunities for engagement that may be in person with smaller groups, that may be more physical activities, so that kids are more physically active and getting some of that exercise in. It adds to the structure of the day. So I'm hopeful that we're starting to really turn that corner, and we can really emphasize with our kids that they need to take advantage of some of these other opportunities that they can do in a safe and healthy manner.
Yeah, thank you for that response, because my next question was related to that. Well, what do you do, as a parent, to counterbalance the significant reduction of extracurricular activities, right? Like, what are some other things that we can do as parents?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because I think that where we would have had a lot of kids spend their time on weekends and after school might have been in an extracurricular activity on a either weekly or periodic basis, and we're seeing obviously less and less of that. I think some families are finding ways to do that, in safe environments. And I will say community programs are doing an excellent job. Athletic, music, art programs are doing an excellent job with safety and sanitation. I can say as a parent who has children attend outside of my home several of those programs, I'm really, really impressed with the efforts that are underway. And as a pediatrician and a psychiatrist, I feel comfortable with my kids participating in some of those. But you're right, it's still not as accessible as it could be, as it was in a pre-COVID world. I think we go back to structure and schedule when it comes to this. We go back to the idea that we're actually going to not only going to schedule an academic day, but on the weekends, we're going to, it sounds strange to say, but we're going to schedule fun time as a family. We're going to find a time at 2 p.m. We're all going to go for a walk. At 3 o'clock, we're going to go for a bike ride around a neighborhood if we have the ability to do that. Or potentially we're going to watch a movie together at a certain time of day. By kind of labeling that that's the time of day that we're going to participate in that, it kind of starts to take on a bit of an extracurricular flavor, and can help kids, I think, feel a little bit more regulated in that context. Feels strange to say when you initially, begin this process of scheduling recreational activities within your family over the weekend, but it starts to feel more natural over time.
I think that's a good point, because we've sort of have been staying in, and kind of not pushing the boundaries, because we're, everybody's a little nervous and scared, but there are ways that you can have play dates outside. Some games that are safe. There are things that you can do as long as you have those mitigations in place. So here's a tough question. All of you are experts, and you're also parents. So here's a tough one. What advice would you give to parents? Because this has not been easy. We've talked about being thrust into the technology world, into a pandemic, supporting our kids at home with learning in many cases, and the back and forth and the stress and talking about all those things with your kids. I know that early on, my daughter was exhibiting a lot of anxiety, worrying that we were going to get sick. But then who talks to the parents? What do you say to the parents? What do you do for yourself? Because I think that we don't do enough of that. And can you please talk about the importance of that?
I think we probably were not, many parents were already juggling a lot of balls before the pandemic started. And then the pandemic started, and we were wearing more hats than we had ever worn before. We had to become a teacher. We had to become IT support. We had to start taking on a lot of roles within our family. So first, everyone should, congratulate yourself. This has been almost a year, and everyone, you're doing the best you can. And that might mean different things at different times. I know for me, sometimes I have to remind myself of that throughout the day. There may be a part of the day where I feel like I've totally got this. And then I have other times during the day where I'm feeling like, well, that did not go as I pictured it in my head. But so you're doing the best you can. And you're loving your child. And I think if we start there, you're loving your child, you're loving your children, you are doing the best you can for them. That's a strength that we all have to build upon. And I think it is so important as parents to take some time for yourself. And I think we say that, and I know I have always been just as guilty of saying, and when am I supposed to exactly fit that in to the day? And this does not mean that you need to take, a huge stretch of time for yourself. But even if you just go into another room and you take 10 deep breaths before you go and tell your child that it's, time to turn off the video games, just taking those, that minute to recenter yourself is really important. And so I think that as parents, we have to not be so hard on ourselves. You are loving your kids. You are doing the best that you can.
Sure. And I think it's also important for parents to understand that they're not in this alone. So everybody else, this is a crazy time, and everybody can acknowledge that. And everybody is going through something, maybe not exact, but pretty similar to what you're going through. So sometimes this is an opportunity to reach out to maybe a friend you haven't spoken with for a little while, just kind of check in on them, see how they're doing, but also compare notes and, kind of, see if, they're doing something that you might want to incorporate into your family. And then, as pediatricians, and one of the main reasons, why we're having this conversation is understand that if it feels like things are really slipping and I'm really worried and I don't know how to handle this particular thing, reach out for help, be it through your pediatrician or, other resources. I always, consider us, we have amazing relationships with our families that start at birth in most cases in pediatrics. And, so we know families, we know the kids, we know the stresses, and, we can help guide. Sometimes it's just a 5-minute conversation to say, you've got this, you're doing great. This is what is happening to everybody. Try this. And, if things are getting worse, give me a call back. Sometimes it's, wow, you really just told me, something that concerns me. Let's get you in here, or let's find you the right resource, be it a counselor or, some other medical type of provider, or get into the office or have a video visit so that we can talk about this in more depth, with the child. So knowing that you have that kind of backup as a parent sometimes takes the pressure off you in the moment to say, all right, I got most of this, but this one piece, I just need a little bit more peace of mind. And so, we're here to encourage folks to, to reach out. The good news, like I said, is we're not seeing a ton of medical visits. We're not being overwhelmed by influenza and other things, because it turns out masks work. Masks and distancing really work well. Our flu season has been a dud, and we're seeing some things, but which gives us, maybe a little bit more time and a little bit more focus to deal with some of the challenges that parents are having. If anything, as another parent, to say, I hear you. This is, this is real.
I would second what you said, Greg, that, emotional challenges are just as legitimate, if not even more legitimate, a reason to seek care as physical challenges. And I would further that statement by also reinforcing what Greg said. Parental emotional challenges are just as legitimate a reason to seek care with your child's pediatrician, in fact, as the physical emotional challenges of my child. I think keeping that in view is really, really important, because I think parents may not always feel, for whatever reason, mental health stigma, reasons within their family in terms of beliefs about what mental illness means or what emotional challenges mean, we're all more hesitant to seek that care. And if we can really overcome it and realize we have these teams of folks at the ready, actually at the ready to focus on this, because influenza and these other illnesses have been so well controlled in the pediatric population, perhaps we'll get some more willingness from parents. The only other comment I might make just really concretely is family meals. I think family meals, in terms of something really concrete that parents can do, eating with your child creates not only a time to spend time together, but a unstructured time for conversation in which you really learn a lot about what's going on.
Yeah, I would say that's been one of the main pluses of COVID in my family, was our opportunity to sit down every night and, you know, kind of shoot the breeze, you know, vent when we needed to, and really get that touch point with our kids. So that can be an absolute blessing of this if you take advantage of it. And I agree. I encourage people to do that.
You know, it's also been an opportunity. We were talking about other ways to engage with our kids that were not electronics. You know, we will let's research, what do you want to learn to make? What do you want to, you know, this is your favorite, this is the meal you always ask for on your birthday. Let me teach you how to make that. And we've done, you know, a lot of cooking that way. We've had a lot of time spent together that way. And while there are fewer activities, that end of the day, we have to be here, we have to be there. Who's picking up this person? Does someone have the carpool? When are we going to do homework? We do have that opportunity to take a breath and get back to some of those basic family times that, you know, that many of our parents and grandparents did use to connect with their families.
Wow. So I have to say that everything that you've said has been very powerful. And what's interesting about the conversation is what you said for the kids also applied to the parents. And I would have never, ever in a million years thought of reaching out to my pediatrician for my support, right? Like it just wouldn't have dawned on me. But who knows your family better than your pediatrician, right? This is someone that's with you constantly and understands the family makeup. So I really appreciate that, because I don't think if you would have said it, at least it wouldn't have occurred to me. And I think ask for help, right? And also forgive yourself. You know, sometimes my daughter's jumping from one chair in the dining room to the other, and I'm like, hey, what are you doing? My husband's like, well, does it really matter? Like, you're right. Does it matter? Does it matter? Is it really that important? Not really. So give yourselves permission to be okay with things that may have been a challenge in the past. And also for us, I think that you said there's been a lot of technology that our kids have been using, but I think we as adults can also take advantage of that. I'm having a cooking party this weekend with my friends throughout the United States. You know, we're doing it together, and that's my time, right? That's my time. My husband is going to sit with my kids and watch a movie. You know, you sort of need to carve out that time, because we are also feeling isolated. And I have to thank you for the commitment that you show for our families and the willingness to help us get through this. Each and every one of you has given us very insightful information as professional, but above all as parents. Thank you.
Well, we really appreciate
very
the
much.
opportunity to have been with you for this period of time. And, you know, I think it means a lot to have the opportunity to share a little bit about what we've learned. Obviously, I would just add the comment that a lot of what we learned from our parents and we learned from our patients. And so we want to thank our parents and patients for educating us.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And as a final plug for folks that are looking for more resources, you know, like I said, we did set up a website. It's probably easiest to navigate through riaap.org. Otherwise, it is Family Health During COVID, ri.org is the special website, but there's a link if you just Google RIAAP. You can link right through, and we collected all sorts of wonderful resources from all over the country, you know, for mental health tips and parenting tips and sleep tips and all the stuff that we've been talking about today. So I'd be remiss if I didn't direct people to that site. Thank you so much, Commissioner. It was an absolute pleasure to get to meet you remotely. Hopefully our paths will cross in person at some point. You took on this job at a very challenging time. I can't imagine you were what, 6 months into the operation when the world fell apart on us. So kudos to you for keeping your sanity and keeping your smile going. And we really appreciate all that you do for the kids of Rhode Island. We are blessed to have amazing school systems and amazing teachers and just an unbelievable support for our kids in the state. So thank you for all that you do.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you. Rhode Island is awesome. Awesome.
I agree.
Thank
right.
you.
All right.
you.
Have a great day.